Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to tonight's IPHA Town Hall. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Ashley McCucken, and I currently serve as the Director of Professional Affairs and Practice Advancement at IPHA. And tonight we are very, very excited for today's presenters and the presentation that they have today. I'm going to hand things over to Miles O'Brien from the Titan Group to kind of get things started today. So hand it over to you, Miles.
Thank you, Ashley. And hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Miles. I am the COO here at the Titan Group. I would like to take a moment to introduce today's speaker, Jack Titleman. Jack is the president, CEO, and founder of the Titan Group. The Titan Group is a DEA regulatory compliance consulting firm. Prior to retiring, sorry, following his retirement, Jack founded the Titan Group. He spent 26 years inside of DEA. Today's presentation is going to be going very in depth in terms of independent pharmacies and really all the chaos that's going on there. To give everyone a breakdown of the agenda, it's going to be about like a 45-minute presentation followed by a 15-minute Q&A. If anyone wants to ask questions, the chat is open. If not, we're going to be taking questions at the end. But without further ado, Jack, the floor is yours.
All right, Miles, thank you very much. And if you get anything out of today's webinar, it's that we are here to help. We are a resource, and because there's a lot of emerging compliance stuff that's happening in the distributor and supplier world that's affecting you guys, and it's affecting you guys, more than the DEA can affect you at this point, right? So I'm going to try and stick to this. Agenda is going to be 6 topics, one through line, and it's basically how you independent pharmacies operate, defend, and grow inside this new regulatory environment. That has fundamentally changed in the last 5 years. It's totally fundamentally changed since the opioid litigation was finalized and the injunctive relief went into place. So I'm going to hit on each of these in order. So if you can, like Miles had said, save your questions for the end. But if something is on fire, right, and you got to bring it up, raise your hand, and we'll deal with it, right? So speaking of fire, the crazy weather that we've had lately, it's just been one thing after another. And so think about, crazy weather patterns. And this is the weather that we're dealing with when it comes to the compliance and regulations issues that you guys are dealing with. 5 crazy weather forces converging on every one of every independent pharmacy in the country, right? And none of them are new in any isolation, right? What's new is that they're operating simultaneously on the same operator with no slack between them. So the one I want you to sit with is number 5, the cost and business viability. Compliance is no longer the line item you trim when things get tight. This is the line item that lets you have the line items at all, right? But without any of this, and without you guys, starting to take, I hate to say take it serious, but I just spent the several hours yesterday with a cardinal investigator at one of our pharmacies, and I'll go through exactly what we went through and why that if you're not, unfortunately, if you're not dealing with it, one of the consultants that's out there, or some independent, or some pharmacist that knows what they're doing, you're going to have major issues going forward with, I can tell you, with Cardinal and Cencora. So, so the big 3 distributors is who I'm talking about, right? They are the major issues right now. They've paid roughly $21 billion to settle. Johnson & Johnson paid another 5. The settlements, they bought peace at the federal and state level, but that did not buy paperwork. Every obligation those settlements imposed, on the distributors gets passed downstream, and that comes right down to you guys. So it's 4 pressures. Each one of them is a real conversation an independent owners having right now with their wholesaler. One of these 4, right? Their attorney or their pick, and by the end of this talk, you'll have a good playbook about all 4 of these. So the main one of the absolute main thing that we discussed yesterday, the very first thing that came out of the investigator's mouth, the last thing we talked about was corresponding responsibility. It is not something anymore that you go, oh yeah, I called the doctor. I know I talked to him several times, and you just go and you're taking things off your head. That doesn't work anymore. If it's not written down, if there's not copious notes, if there's not diagnosis codes, if there's not X-ray, if you don't have records of tests, if you don't have drug urinalysis reports. There is so much right now that's going into this. And the responsibility for proper prescribing and dispensing of the CSs is upon the prescribing practitioner, as you know, right? But we all know that the corresponding responsibility rests with the pharmacist who fills that prescription. You can say no. So, I could go on and more on this, and I will. But you must realize that the DEA does not need to prove that you knew that prescription was bad, right? All they need to do is prove that a reasonable pharmacist who's exercising independent professional judgment in your shoes on that day should have known, but you filled it anyways. Okay, we've all done it. So, and these are the things now that we're having to give answers to. Why did you? And they're coming with specific prescriptions. They're coming with specific patients and doctors. Why did you fill this prescription for this amount of drugs for this patient? And did you talk to the doctor and blah 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 blah. So, and one of the other things, if you have chronic pain patients, right? And let's say you have 10 or 15, 20, 25 chronic pain patients that you guys are treating, every one of those should be a file. And every one of those that has a corresponding prescriber, that should be a file on that person too. Without that going forward, without those files filled with correspondence and information that you should be able to pull out, that you're going to be able to talk with the Cardinal or Sincora or McKesson investigators or the DEA. Without that, you're going to have major issues. Okay. So, red flags are the bane of their existence now, and none of these are new to any of you. Every pharmacist in this room can recite them. So I'm going to do something that maybe it's a little disrespectful, and I'm not going to explain them. I'm going to assume you already know them. What I want to talk about instead is what triggers what, and I'm going to walk through them pretty fast. So geographic distance, that's probably number one. If a patient drove past 14 pharmacies to reach you, could be a great patient, right? Could be a problem. Either way, you're probably not the greatest pharmacy in the world, and that's why they pass 14 pharmacies to get to you. Just be careful about that. Cash payments, they're going to question all cash payments. Cash for controlled substances when insurance is on file is not a customer, it's not a customer service question. It's a compliance question. Treat it like one. We all know what the Holy Trinity is: oxycodone plus alprazolam plus soma. But that doesn't matter anymore. Now they're looking at combinations. Why are you filling an opioid with an alprazolam or some benzo? We need explanations. Do the two doctors know you're doing this? Has there been communication? Have you talked to both of these doctors? Early refills, you shouldn't really be doing any refills past one day. If you start going past one day, they're going to question that, and they're going to have issues, right? And then they're going to say, if you're going 2 days with that's almost another prescription at the end of the year. So they're going to frown on that. Prescriber scope mismatch, dentists writing chronic opioids, pain clinics from another state, MPI primary code is, MPI specialty code is on every prescription, look at it. And then cohort prescribing, 3 patients, same prescriber, same drug, same dose, same quantity, same week. This is not a coincidence, right? This is a pattern. So, here's the operating rule. One flag triggers an analysis, right? Two flags triggers documented resolution. 3 flags, you should be on the phone with the prescriber before you reach for the bottle, right? Refusing without investigating does not protect you. So, filling without resolving does not protect you. The middle path, investigate, document, decide, is the only path to go. So, threshold management is, you're not going to find this chart in any wholesaler training. You're not going to find these percentages, right? In any contract. I built this from a DEA case data and in industry conversations because nobody else will put it on a slide. So, Here's the deal. The wholesaler is a private regulator. They write the rules. They enforce the rules. They decide the appeals. The appeals go to the same person who decide to who the same person who cut you out in the first place, right? So just remember the threshold breach is the number one reason your account gets restricted, not because you did anything wrong. That that's not, they'll come in and they'll question those. What they're looking for is you to make changes because the algorithm decided your volume ceased, it crossed a line that you just can't see, and they're not going to tell you what that line is too. Just so you can ask and ask, they're just not going to tell you. So high percent of controls. If you have a if you have a pain management or long-term care population, this is structural. This is nothing you can do about it except document it aggressively. PMP and ARCO's outliers. The data is in that data is in two databases. Both are queryable, and both are searchable. So, your purchases are going to show up in Arcos. The distributors are going to look at those, and the PMP, excuse me, they don't always have access to that. So they're only relying on Arcos and what they can see from what you're buying from them. They only see that you're buying from another distributor. They don't know, who that distributor is. Failed onboarding questionnaire. Your questionnaire that you submit at the end of the year for your upcoming new contract, that gets graded. And a lot of pharmacies fail that original, when you submit that onboarding questionnaire. Affiliated prescriber on a watch list, that you got to make sure you use MedPro and some of the other checks to make sure that these doctors aren't sitting out there on some watch list. You've got to make sure that the doctors that you're prescribing for don't have a current DEA issue. So look, one piece of practical advice from this slide is get on a first name basis with your wholesaler rep, and before you need to be. So by the time you need them, the decision's already gone 3 levels up. So just beware of what you order, and one bottle could put you over your threshold. So it can get expensive. 66,000, 1,600, 19,500 and some change is the current DEA violation, which is advertised. That's the maximum civil penalty per CSA violation per prescription, is adjusted during, around 2025. It doesn't really matter, if you're not proactive. If DEA is going to come in, they're going to find something, DEA, but DEA, the DEA it's not there to put you out of business. They're there to make sure you're compliant and drugs aren't going out the back door. They're not concerned with all these red flags that we're going to go over. That's not their main concern, right? Their main concern are you staying in, within your lane as a pharmacist, and are you violating anything in the CSA? Great. No. If you passed your audit, continue on. So, just be aware that, certain things can take a long time. If things go order to show causes can take months and months and months, but one of the other things that you need to do is have a secondary supplier. If you get caught up and you get suspended from your main supplier, you're going to get suspended from all your suppliers, any supplier, right? So, and these, I'm not giving these numbers of deterrence. They're tools, and every one of these has been used. So, the pharmacy on the other end of an order is not different from the other pharmacy. Just, in this room, except, in respect, they didn't believe this slide. And it can go sideways, and one of the things we don't want is to not have an option. So please make sure that you have a secondary wholesale supplier that you can get not just 3 through 5 but Schedule 2 drugs as well. Once you get suspended from one of the big three, all three will suspend you. That's the way the game works now. So this is pillar number 1. There's 4 pillars, and we'll spend maybe a minute or 2 on each one. And if you leave here with these pillars and nothing else, I think the day will be a success. So the policies is the floor, and practice is the defense. The most common mistake, that I see in independent pharmacies, and I see it almost every week, is the binder of policies that was downloaded for some trade association, printed in 2019, has never been opened, right? The binder's not your defense. Right, you bring that out, and DEA just throws that aside. It's an exhibit number once the DEA errors that you were not even pretending to take this seriously, right? So, Written SOPs, they don't have to be long, be specific, to your store, and they shouldn't be a template. Per RX documentation, you should have a worksheet attached to every controlled, substance prescription, where every, flag is present, even when you fill it out, right? We have a new software tool that does all of that. It's part of our Sage Comply Analytics. But I'm telling you, if you have to document, you have to write things on on your prescriptions, right? Even though you're getting electronic prescriptions, print it out, make sure that you document and you take notes if you have to call the doctor. And these are things that need to go into those files. Self-monitoring data, the reports we see on the data side, monthly, filed, reviewed, initialed, outreach log. That's something that's so important when they say, "Hey, how often do you talk to these doctors?" When you get a prescription in, we say, "Well, I have a prescriber outreach log, and it can tell you every doctor that I've talked to, when I talked to them, and what we talked about." That's a lifesaver. It's just like having a perpetual inventory of all your narcotics. That is a lifesaver. When I find one of those from an old school pharmacist, it makes our job of going through and doing the accountability audit way easier. Do you have a designated compliance lead, someone who's been through been through the ringer, has maybe spent, the day with somebody our team. We went through and did a mock audit, and we've worked with them and did some, master level class training with them on how to survive a DEA inspection. So look, if your store has all six, you have a program in place, right? If you have five, you have a project. If you have fewer than five, you have what's called exposure. So this is the real deal. And I could tell you, when we were finished with the Cardinal representative yesterday, he's like, "I got four or six more pharmacies to go to tomorrow. None of them are represented by any type of consultant or anyone that's been working with them." And preparation and having all your ducks in a row. And I'm going to show you a document that we gave to it was a 6-page document describing everything that we've been doing for the past year with bar charts, with all sorts of stuff. This is what we have to go through now. And I hate to sound like I'm pleading, but this is the type of levels that we're going through with an independent pharmacy here in New Jersey that was cut off a year ago. And these are the lengths we have to go to get Cardinal to at least let us get to the table to mea culpa as much as we've done and say, "Look at all the great stuff that we put in place. Please give us a second chance." And I think we're there. I think that, we made it through our interview with the head pharmacist, and we made it through yesterday, I think, with flying colors. So we're probably going to get a new contract. But this is what happens, and there's no wiggle room anymore once they cut you off. So this is a slide that I get the most pushback on, right? Because the conservative pharmacist in the room is thinking, "Well, I just refused the controlled prescription. I'm safe." Right? So the DEA expects you to investigate it, right? Why did you not fill it? Something's wrong. So your spidey senses went off. We need you to tell us you're part of our self-policing operation out there, right? We need you to help and tell us if there's a doctor out there that's doing something that's a little, as they say in Italian, fugazi. So investigate, like I said before, document and then decide. So do it in that order. So refusing without investigating, as I said before, is treated as evidence of just an arbitrary process, right? So and I'm not gonna beat a dead horse, but we all know how to investigate. We all had to make decisions. We know how to document, right? So the do is make sure that you verified your PMP. You called Dr. Smith at 2:14 p.m. You confirmed it was post-op pain. The 7-day supply. What it was for. Very specific, timestamp, very substantive. A don't would be called MD. 3 words. That was it. Called MD. So the inspector will see and understand the difference between the two that I just gave you. So look, pillar 2, documentation discipline. Pillar 3 is supply chain resilience, right? And that's what you need. You need to have supply chain resilience. So look, you have to have somebody to fall back on. 62% of independents don't have they have a sole primary wholesaler and zero backups. So 26% have a primary plus one backup, and only 12% have a real secondary wholesale relationship. So if you're in that 62%, you are one threshold change email away from a very bad month. We're working with a pharmacy right now that was a week away from being out of business. And if it wasn't for a relationship we have with a generic drug distributor that has allowed us to bring what we consider, problem pharmacies that they're taking on the risk, we were able to get him the ability to order at least 3 through 5 drugs to keep the pharmacy open. So this is a very, very real and a business. This can destroy your business very, very quickly. And he was out of drugs fast. So, and because like I said, as you saw the other one before, it can take 60 to 100 to 220 days to get onboarded. So that's a number. That is not a number that flexes with your situation when your situation's urgent. That's a number every month, every quarter, every year, right? So make sure you onboard a wholesaler now. Pre-build your wholesaler dossier, make a couple orders, make sure they have everything that you need, and make sure you meet your rep and you've got a pretty good relationship with that person before you've got a problem. So single source dependency is the most preventable extinction event in independent pharmacy. So if you fix that, fix it before the cut letter comes, not after. So this slide gets the most groans because every pharmacist in this room is thinking, I did not go to pharmacy school to be an analyst. And to that I say, I understand. And I did not become a DEA agent. I was a baseball player in college. Trust me, I didn't know anything about statistics and all this kind of stuff. I was hardwired to learn math. I had to learn math the hard way. So, but to that I understand. And I also say, well, that's just too bad. The real line is a hypothetical pharmacy. The red line is a wholesaler match threshold. The thing to notice is not the moment the line crosses the threshold. The thing to notice is that the line was climbing towards that threshold for 9 months before crossing happened. So every one of those 9 months was a chance to act. And none of them got taken because nobody was looking. So, we look at that, there's 6 KPIs that are super important in this. And percent of controls versus total RX, as long as you keep it around 15 or below, you're not going to be visible. But if you're over that, you're going to be visible. Your percent of CSs versus your total control, that could change depending on your business model. But somewhere between 4 to 5 to 10%. It just depends. It can be a higher number, but again, what is your business model? Top 10 prescribers by volume and dose. We need to know about everything. We run top 100, and we're constantly running them through our software because the doctors we need to know what's happening with these doctors, and we're able to pull tons of data on these prescribers. We can do it every day if we had to, but we normally do it every month. So if one of them shows up in the news, you need to know about it before the news breaks, right? Average miles that your patients come to your pharmacy. If you're out in the country in the middle of Illinois somewhere where they're going to be driving, probably you're in the middle of farmland out there with all the the windmills, so they're going to be driving long distance to come to your pharmacy. But if you're in a larger city in Illinois, they shouldn't be coming that far. So look, 6 numbers, once a month, print, date, and fill. That paper trail is half your defense. If a conversation ever begins with the words, we'd like to understand your dispensing patterns, right? So this is just, good explanation of how your data can be used against you. So, so here's the plan. I'm not going to ask you guys to have, you don't have to hire a compliance department. I'm not going to ask you to buy software. I'm only going to ask you to use a calendar, a binder, and some willingness to write things down. So that is the entire infrastructure of a real compliance program in an independence pharmacy, right? So if you take 30 days to do it, you can, or give you 90 days, right? Your first 30 days is, stabilizing everything, making sure that you're, that you've done the things we talked before, putting ahead someone in charge of the compliance, right? Pull, 12 months of data, start to look at your trends, put together your SOPs. That's the type of stuff that needs to, be put in place. Your next 60 days should be hardening, those defenses. and apply to that secondary distributor, right? Start your monthly KPI review, document your prescriber call logs, your templates, start using them, right? Audit a sample of your last 100 controlled prescriptions against your SOP. You're going to find gaps, right? Those gaps are not the problem. Not finding them, right, is the problem. And then your next 30 days is your defense. That's where you come in and you do a mock DEA inspection, use an outside review or build your wholesaler dossier, pre-clear it with your pharmacy rep, and schedule a quarterly compliance, review. Those are all the things that 90 days, most everything we do takes 90 days from beginning to end. And I'll leave you with one line on this one, right? The pharmacy that does not survive the next 5 years of regulatory pressure is not the pharmacy that did something wrong. It's the pharmacy that did nothing different. And that's exactly what they were saying yesterday at Cardinal. What changes have you made? We want to see changes, right? We want to see a lot of changes, not just, oh, I did a lit here. No, we want to see substantial changes. So the discipline of starting is the only part of this that's actually hard. And it's like anything else. It's like working out, it's like dieting. It's just getting started, getting through that first 21 days, and then it becomes a habit. So you got to have a file of all your pertinent, documents that DEA is going to want to look at. This is the single biggest cause of findings in a DEA inspection is not what's in the binder, it's how long it takes you, the pharmacy, to find what should be in that binder, right? So, the regulation uses the phrase ready and retrievable. That language is intentional. If you can't produce it without delay, it doesn't exist for inspection purposes. We got totally screwed at a methadone clinic recently because one of the nurses forgot there was a bottle of methadone, 40 milligrams methadone, up on another floor in another safe. And it wasn't until after we closed out and did the count, and they went, "Oh my God, I know where that extra 90 is. It's upstairs." And the DEA went, "Too bad. It should have been here. It should have been readily retrievable as part of our request." So, it's the binder. This is a binder, right? And it shouldn't be a treasure hunt. And the treasure hunt is what DEA they love to see. Those are that's just like chickens with their heads coming off. So these are some of the things that should be in there. It's not that difficult to look at this. A lot of these things, these are very easy. You already have your licenses, your power of attorneys and stuff like that, your biennial inventories. All this stuff you should have all in one spot that's easy to pull out and hand to the DEA or to whoever the regulatory person is that's going to be working with you. So when you're telling the DEA your story about your supply chain, that's how it needs to come out. If we all love to hear a good storyteller, and that's what you need to be, right? And the 10 principles around this whole program, it all falls within a good story. And so imagine the DEA just walks in tomorrow and they pull a random oxycodone receipt from January. Can your records in 5 minutes or less account for every single tablet on that receipt? Where it went, when, and to whom? If yes, then you have a good story. If you're scrambling, you don't have a story, you have paperwork. So the difference is decisive. Records that tell a story protect you. Paper that doesn't connect, is the DEA, paper that doesn't connect is, in the DEA's eyes, evidence of a control failure. So if you think about the story of that oxycodone, the DEA was at the manufacturing plant that made that oxycodone. They went and they measured the API that was used to make it, the oxycodone. They followed it to the drug distributor. They went to the drug distributor's warehouses. They did audits on that oxycodone there. And then it got sold to you. So now the DEA is coming to hear your story. And they've already heard the story of that bottle, where it was made, where it was sold, where it was bought, and now you own it. So now they want to hear that story. So for you guys, pharmacists know reconciliation better than most, and when it comes to inventory control, especially controlled substances, as you guys should. But some people don't get the difference between taking an inventory and then reconciling it. So if you think about reconciliation, it's an ongoing activity, it's a verb. Inventory is a snapshot in time, it's a noun. So you reconcile constantly on your inventory, so you reconcile constantly so your inventory holds up. So examples to deploy, if you have time, you can say I reconciled today equals you check dispense logs against perpetual. I took inventory equals you did a physical count to freeze, your date. So, bonus DEA pleasing line, is a clean biennial inventory backed by clean weekly reconciliations is the single strongest documentation pattern inspector can see. I mean, we go into places that never count and they have done a count once every 2 years, which is the biennial. There's going to be issues. How are you going to survive a 2-year reconciliation? And that you're just if you haven't reconciled in 30 days, you go out 60 days, now things are going to start to fall apart. And it's just human, right? Human beings, we make mistakes. So, look, if you can do it weekly, I recommend it. If at worst do it monthly. At the worst do it quarterly, right? But you can start off weekly, and then if you feel things are doing fine, then increase and expand, the different time when you do it. So, the difference between passing, an inspection and a finding is almost always whether the reconciliation cadence held up under stress. Vacations, sick days, end of year, I'm too tired, I don't want to do it today. So if the cadence, breaks down, the moment things get busy, technically the cadence of reconciliation just didn't exist. So physically attach your reconciliation sheet that you do to the end of shift checklist. So if your worksheet isn't signed, then the shift isn't closed. And we get hammered on that in our methadone clinics. There'll be a turnover in shift because we have to do end of shift reconciliation, and then we have to do end of shift counts. Sometimes a nurse will forget to sign, and then that'll come up during the DEA review, and we'll get hit for that. So just be aware of that. Look, I mean, I'm still baffled when I go in and just find drugs in a cabinet. And in today's world, there's safes out there, right? There's really good storage that are better than just a C2 cabinet that I can open up in 3 seconds with a crowbar. So, it just make sure it's something that's, that's substantially constructed, that's bolted to the floor, to the wall, and it can't be grabbed and carried out. I don't need to spend much time on what is substantial construction. We all know what a good 750-pound safe looks like. It's DEA will come in and if you don't have pull down gates, locks, and gun turrets, lights and sirens, all sorts of stuff. You walk. Look, I've been in pharmacies that don't have an alarm. I don't understand it. Where did security not become tantamount? Security is absolutely the most important thing when it comes to your supply chain. You have to have an alarm. You have to have cameras. You have to have some type of roll down gate, right? It depends on if you're in the middle of if you're in somewhere that doesn't need one, I would say okay, you don't need one. But most pharmacies that I go to do have some type of measure like that. Around here in New Jersey they do. And I'm assuming they probably do, and especially in Chicago and some of the other areas too. So, if any of you have ever had, a theft or some type of loss, just remember the clock, 1 business day, not the next time you talk to the DEA, not, when we figure out what happened, 1 business day from discovery in writing. So most pharmacies that get in serious trouble after a loss did not fail to report a loss. They failed to report it on time. I just had a place call me the other day. They got in trouble from DEA because they was a late notification, and the DEA was like, "Hey, too late. This is a violation. You should have reported it when you shouldn't have waited as long as you did." So just if it doesn't hurt, you can fill the 106 in, and you can always pull it back. You can always say that, we were mistaken. We did our investigation and there was nothing found. It was a mistake. It was just a pure record keeping issue. So the thing that you did right was you just went ahead and self-reported. So, look, and when you do, it's not a difficult thing to do. Most calls I get about a loss, end up with us discovering it was like a 200 tablet receiving entry typo or something. The DEA does not know the difference between a real loss and a phantom one until you tell them. So before you tell them, be sure. So, just, remember 21 CFR 1301.76B is, the most important area here. That memorize that, read it once I mean, this is it, right? I mean, if you guys can read it, and it is the area that is the most important part. So, just that, 24 hours, just let them know if it is a loss, and then you can do your investigation. And if you figure out that it's not, then you let them know, hey man, false alert, false alarm. They don't care. They got plenty of things to do. Make sure you go through and do discrepancy, check discrepancies, look at this as a triage tool. And before you escalate anything, walk through your list. My experience, 7 out of 10 apparent discrepancies are resolved, at question one, an invoice that hadn't been entered yet. 3 out of 10 resolve at question number 2 through 6. The ones that survive all seven are the real ones. So, laminate this slide, post it somewhere near where you do reconciliation. The act of asking questions out loud sometimes forces the right discipline. At least it does for me. I think maybe that's because I got hit a lot as a kid in the head. Oh, that was because I was a catcher. Something like that. So all right, look, drug diversion is going to happen. You guys got drugs that people need, and we're dealing with human beings. We are weak. We are subject to the whims of addiction. We are in a pill popping society, but addiction can get you from anywhere, right? It can be alcohol, it can be benzos, it can be opioids, it can be anything, cocaine, methamphetamines. I can just go down the list of every drug out there that we've got horrible addiction in this country. So it's just it is not a matter, of if drug vision will occur in your pharmacy. All of you, it's probably there's five-finger discounts happen, to every aspect of your business. It's just a matter of when. So, and that's not pessimism. That's design. If you build, your program assuming nothing will ever happen, well, the moment something happens, then the program breaks. So build it assuming that you'll be tested. You build your program thinking I needed the alarm to go off when someone's trying to break in, right? And you're going to be tested by an employee. I mean, you guys have pharmacies, so you're going to get broken into. I've had multiple pharmacies that have been robbed, right? So, but the majority of your thefts and losses are going to come from staff. So if you use the 5 risk dimensions here, to think about your own pharmacy, which of these, look at it and think about which of these are you weakest on today. So this is more of like it frames like HR compliance. And if you treat hiring as a people decision and not as a controls decision, you're leaving the front door open. So you need to do background checks because these are people that you're giving authority and agency to use to use the controlled substances in your pharmacy. Make sure you do call past employers, do reference checks, do drug screenings, right? These are all things that are all easy things to do that we've found, and these are not bureaucratic boxes. These are diversion controls because every one of the things I just described to you by not doing has come back to bite someplace because they didn't do a background check because they didn't call the person worked at. So the right-hand stat block is the gut check. Most diversion in your pharmacy is internal. This is the operating reality you build your hiring practices around. Okay. Not because every candidate is a suspect, because the program has to be robust against the inevitable rare, bad actor. And, you're going to have them. So this is your operations slide, right? The other one was your HR slide. This is your operations slide. It's also the place to be slightly self-deprecating with, most pharmacists I've met, have written SOPs that nobody on the shift has ever read. I mean, a written SOP that nobody follows is worse than just not having an SOP. And like I said, they just have to be simple. How do I make this bread that my mom gave me the recipe for it so that it smells and tastes like this my mom's bread. That's an SOP. That's a recipe. And if you follow it every single time, basic recipe, water, flour, yeast, we win. So, you know, that you do that, it documents any gaps, you're not going to make mistakes. And that gap is what regulators read first, right? So write the SOP, train to it, rotate your audits, do different drugs, use different people to do it. Make sure you sign everything when it comes to those audits and reviews. That's the game. You can prove that you did it. So, you do some of these 7 habits, the things that you see up here, these are things that we've talked about already, right? Double counting of court. I mean, you should be doing that, track your shorts, reconcile 4 times a year. If you adapt these 7, your binder will defend itself when an inspector shows up. We're doing all right on time, Miles? I'm getting close.
Yeah, it is 8:42, so you're good.
All right. So, well, for every pharmacy in this room, somebody else, three somebody else's has more data about your business than you do. Arcos, PMP, distributor algorithms, PBM analytics. Each one is running a report on your pharmacy this week. The only party that hasn't seen that report is you, right? So the score is a composite. There, 30 signals weighted to align, with the categories that DEA and distributors actually use. If you look at what the B plus tells you, you're in good shape with room to improve. The KPI grid shows you the underlying numbers, which way is moving. The priority list at the bottom isn't generic. It's the algorithmically, derived from where your specific risk is concentrating. This is your monthly dashboard, right? This is what you would see if you were pulling the data and you were actually looking at the stuff that we talked about. This is actually reality. This is what we're doing now with probably about 25 pharmacies right now. And look here, if you look they share 38 patients in this one in this one in this one example. This report, and this is the report that ends arguments. 2 of your top prescribers are in the documented cluster. You did not know. The DEA knew 6 months ago. Your distributor knew the last quarter. Now you're finding out, and you have time to do something about it. Excuse me. So, and here again, here's the threshold proximity and trend. And you notice that you had 9 months, as we described before, to do something about it. And as soon as it crosses the red line, then we've got, then it becomes, a 5 alarm fire. So, look here, it shows a stale POA line is universal. That's something that we probably all need to look at. Onboarding readiness is the single number that determines whether a new wholesaler picks up the phone when you call. Right? 92 means that they pick up, below 70 and you're back of the queue. This report doesn't just tell you the number, it tells you the 2 items to fix, and fix to move it. And this is, we try to demystify, the platform, it's no magic. It's the same data. We're looking at the same data that the regulators have. We're pulling your dispensing data, but we're normalizing it properly. Right. We're running algorithms purposely built through that, that through questions that we know that the independent pharmacy operator is actually asking, right? The magic is nobody's put this exact tool set in a pharmacist's hands before until now, right? And we know it's working. I can just use yesterday as a perfect example of somebody that's had, major issues. So compliant, look. Compliance is not a data problem or a field problem. It's both. The pharmacy that buys software still gets surprised on the day of the inspection. The pharmacy that only buys consulting gets surprised between inspections. The combination field plus data, though, that's the complete answer, right? And data analytics is literally the only way to go. And the combination of both is truly the only combination that we know that works, that works today. Miles, I know this is time for questions. I want to see if I want to just real quickly share I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second, and then I'm
Yeah.
going to share.
Mhm.
Let me just find where are you guys? What am I gonna do with you?
Yeah, you're
Um,
good, Jack. No worries.
okay, I'm just trying to find where you guys minimize to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hold on a second. Well, while I'm looking, oh, here we are. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
back to this. All right. Let me try to put here and then. I'm gonna switch here. There we are. Okay, can you guys see this?
No, Jack. We can just see you. So
You
if you want
see
to hit share
me?
at the bottom.
Oh, all right, hold on. Let me see if I can
Yeah.
switch. Hold with me, hold with me. Switch screen share. Lock displays. You see it now?
No, we cannot.
All right. Let me try this. I'll try this. Nothing. Are you guys, you see anything or just me?
Just you.
Oh, it's because I'm not sharing the screen?
Correct. Yeah.
Why didn't you tell me that? All right, let's try it one more time.
Yeah.
All right, so go back to here. Let's go back.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take a question or two, Miles? Well, while I'm embarrassing
Yeah.
myself here with my inability to use
Mhm.
this because I've lost you guys again. But go ahead,
Yeah, no
let's
worries.
start with some questions.
Yeah, so Jack, currently there are no questions here in the chat, but
Yeah.
if anyone does have a question, if you guys want to raise your hand, we can unmute you and ask live. If someone here has a question and doesn't feel comfortable asking in the public, that's fine. Oh, actually, you know what? Hey Jack, we have our first question here.
Okay, do it.
Hello. Yes, my name is Averill. I own a pharmacy. I'm on the Wisconsin border in Illinois. We are an independent pharmacy, but we're a combo. However, the majority of my patients, they're hospice patients. And when I say the majority, I mean, I would almost say 75%, if not 80% of my patients are hospice based. And being that Chicago is so spread out, um, I'm about an hour north of Chicago, but I have patients as far as 2 hours, 2.5 hours out because the agencies that I work with, they all have the same doctors, but I've had to work with Cardinal, and they've worked with me. They've increased my levels, but after hearing this, I get a little nervous now because I mean, I have logs, I do a perpetual inventory. I'm actually in the process of reconciling my controls for the end of my shift. We do that at the end of the day every day. But I'm still, after hearing this, I'm just curious. What are some of the things that I should be looking at? Because I feel like I have a slightly unique situation.
Yeah, and you are, right? You're one of those. I was like, look, your business model might be one where you're just, like you said, 75% some narcotics, right? And in that situation, the DEA understands your business, right? And I'm going out there. I'm probably assuming you guys have had a DEA inspection before.
When we first opened in another location, yes, we moved locations um, about 2 years ago. But I had a good relationship with the inspector the first time. They loved we for our community side we do good faith dispensing. We take for the community patients we take licenses for the first fill for C2s, and we checked PDMP for before every fill. So we do all of that, and that's documented in our software, the date and time of what records on that day that patient had received up for the past 30 days that we filled the last prescription. And if they're new, we'd absolutely do that same thing as well.
Yeah.
So we try our best to do a lot of what you were talking about, but I just feel I feel like I'm doing it, but I feel some exposure, if that makes any
So
sense.
I'm going to show you guys really quick what and this is the new program that we've designed that we're putting that pharmacies on through. And now the ones that are going through the program now are ones that have had that are under some severe issues, right, with their wholesalers and or the DEA. The one today, the pharmacy's under an MOA with the DEA and has been restricted. So I'm getting them back to Cardinal while they're still under an MOA. And the DEA is fine with the monitoring we've been doing. I've dealt with the DEA 2 years in a row, right? So, and as you can see, we're doing a 24-month look at your dispensing data. We're looking at 30 plus red flags, more than what they're looking at, right? And we're doing it 4 times a year. So, in this instance, what it's doing is that, like I was telling you guys before, it's a corresponding responsibility rebuild. And it literally puts your corresponding responsibility on steroids, because the stuff that you're kind of just talking about, we're continuously doing it for the pharmacy, right? We're preparing you guys for the end of the year discussion you're going to have with Cardinal about why I need to buy more bottles of morphine than we've ever bought before, because we're going to probably have 2 or 3 more new contracts with new doctors that are in the end of life business. So these are things that we need to prepare and put together for your whoever your distributor is. So, and like I said before, the initial evaluation is we're looking at those things that I talked about a little bit before during their training. Right. And these are some of those things: the geospatial distance, right? Early refills. And, and then it all leads into us being able to prove that you're doing your corresponding responsibility, right? It's the prescriber outreach, but instead of it being a log, we're doing it logically. It's being built into the system. The system's kicking out. And this pharmacy that this was at today is the very first pharmacy in America that is using that our algorithms are looking at immediately saying this doctor's an issue and this patient looks like an issue. We need to send it. We were able to prepare an email and send that email directly to the provider, looking for an instantaneous. We need an answer. We need to know why that this patient is being treated this way on this 30 milligram oxycodone we've never seen this person on any type of oxycodone at this those type before. So and then that's the email alert system, right? So we look for it. It fires a red alert. We provide the email instantly. We're able to get a response. We keep that response, because then that's the log that we want to be able to prove the show to Cardinal or DEA. And then it says documented filler decision. You've already made that. But these are for problems. These are for something that we've discovered, for something that's ongoing. So those predictive early warning analytics are what you guys need to help you survive, because they're already looking at it, right? And we've also set it up so we've created an internal suspicious order monitoring for you guys. We're tracking what your purchases are versus your dispensing. And so we're able to say, hey, wait a minute, you should not have to have made any orders, recently. You should have had an extra 2 bottles on hand. We need to do a reconciliation. Right. So, that's a really neat thing that we've started. So, and then we monitor every red flag that the SOM is looking at and the KYC teams are looking at. And these are just examples of what we're looking at from our software, right? And this is exactly what they're looking at. So, we designed this to give you guys a chance against them before they come in. And basically, they're grading you ahead of time. We want you to grade the test. We have the answers to the test now, right? So we want to go ahead and prepare for the test, study for the test, get everything together. So here's just some samples of what of data of what it looks like from what we're able to put together. And you can see, so how some of these concentrations and percentages look like, when it calls, cash pay, distances, high MMEs, right? And high MMEs can be jacked around by people getting early refills. You got to be, you have to be, concerned about that. And then we're constantly, every quarter doing a red flag scorecard. And it's a baseline versus, we do it through it, over the year. And these are things that, that we're constantly tracking. Prescriber concentration, you can see here, this is, for us and for Cardinal, this made perfect sense. This is the area where the pharmacy is, and this is where all the patients are coming from. As you can see, there's some outliers, but this pharmacy is on the New York State border. So these are people that are coming from New York State. So that geospatial distance thing is very important. It's important that you guys understand it because it can all of a sudden you've got people coming from long distances. That's indicative of a pill mill, right? And then, this is like MME distribution, those are things that, that you need to be concerned about. DEA is concerned about. And of course, the distributors looking at it. So, and these are things, look, besides all that baseline, doing, making sure that you guys are, doing some type of internal audits, and having, these other things, there that are in place that make it really important. All right, so that was, I just wanted to throw that out there, Miles, that, kind of, stop it here. Boom. Of what
Thank you, Jack.
we're having to kind of go through, kind of to lay out the real world, example of what we're having to do now with, and that was an explanation sheet that was handed to Cardinal about the program. So, they don't, it's a big, I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, I act like a salesman, but I mean, my job is, just like anything else, is to represent and to make sure that, that we put you guys in the best light, work with you, train, and do the things that we have to do
Mhm.
just to make sure that they get the warm fuzzy that you guys have gone above and beyond, that what they think you should have,
Mhm.
for them to continue to sell you guys drugs. Because this is, literally, this is, it's coming down to, and if they decide not to sell them to you, then nobody's going to sell to you.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you, Jack. Does anyone here have any other questions? Again, if you don't want to ask in like a public forum, that's fine. You can actually message me privately if you'd like. If anyone doesn't want their question answered here in public, you can also shoot me an email that I'm actually going to drop here in the chat as well, just in case anyone wants to reach out if they have any questions or concerns, or maybe just want to dive into something deeper. Ashley, you still there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, good to see you
Oh.
again.
Yes. So, if anyone has any questions, as Miles said, please feel free to email him with any of those. I want to thank you both, Jack and Miles, for the presentation today. Definitely brought a lot of things to light and definitely very important, especially for pharmacies today, to look into and making sure that they have those procedures in place just in case something were to happen. Because, as you said, it's if, not when at this point.
Correct.
Just definitely want to thank you all for your time, as well as thank you everyone that attended the town hall today. Just a little reminder, we are about a month away from the Illinois Pharmacists Association annual conference that's being held in East Peoria. That will be from August 28th through the 30th. We do have our hotel block closing on August 6th, so just a reminder to book that. And then registration is open as well. So we'll be very happy to hopefully see most of you within just a short month here. But thank you again, Miles and Jack. And you all have an amazing evening.
Thanks,
All right.
Ashley. Bye, everyone.
See you, Jake.